This is Jim Van Grift saying welcome to the Sports Show. Today we're going to have a mixed match here of several high school and college basketball, football, volleyball, baseball, lacrosse, softball, track and field. I'm going to talk a little bit about who these guys are, how they started, what they're doing in their careers, how far they are on it, and then we're going to talk about some of the tough calls in athletics. Also, we're going to talk about why aren't we getting any more new officials coming in. I think in all officials across the state, there's a shortage of officials. So we're going to just get started right now. We'll just sit back and enjoy it for a little bit. And we'll just start right here on the front corner here with Lee Day. When did you start? How long you been doing it? Are you retired or what? Take off.
Okay. Started officiating in 1980 after coaching basketball for 1 year at Lebanon High School. There was a gentleman that happened to work at Lebanon High School also that thought it'd be a good idea for me to get started in officiating, namely the guy sitting to my left over here. But,
that's been a long time ago.
That's been a long time ago, huh? Uh-huh. But said that, well, you can go work some games down at Berry Junior High and get home 7 o'clock, time for supper, and take home about $25 in your pocket, and it's a good day.
In 1980, $25.
That was good.
Yep.
So that's how it started, and worked junior high games and pretty much stayed in Lebanon because I wasn't into driving any place at that time. So we just did that, and back then we had, I think it was called a temporary license and an interim license. And I think about my second or third year, I was on that interim license, and you walked up to me and said, what are you doing Saturday night? And
you remember that?
I said, oh, I don't know, nothing probably. He said, you want to go work a ball game? And I had worked a couple JV games for you. You got me started with that, and you were doing a varsity game, and I was going along as your JV official, because back then, that's the way that they were assigned, is the varsity official got the JV officials. Mm-hmm. And so you asked me what I was doing, and I said, okay, I'll go work the game. And I said, who am I working with? And you said, me. I said, no. I said, I'm doing a JV game, Vandy. He says, no, you're not. He said, you're doing a varsity game. And I said, but Vandy, I don't have my license yet to do the varsity game.
We'll be all right.
And that's exactly what you said. Then you said something else about, oh, don't worry about it. They won't know what's going on anyway. And I won't say exactly what you said because I don't want to let that out. But lo and behold, that was my first varsity basketball game down at Blanchester. And I think that was in 1982, I believe it was. And from there, I officiated 37 years. I retired from high school basketball 2 years ago. During the course of that time, I also officiated 15 years of college basketball in Division III, along with the branch campus and the JUCOs in Ohio. And wasn't necessarily interested in moving up or going any further with it. I was happy doing with what I was doing. And at a time then, I got out of college officiating and stuck with high school because I enjoyed that the most. And I was real fortunate to work a lot of ball games, with you as a JV official, and then working with you as a varsity high school official, and also some college games together. So that was a treat to be able to do that, even though for the most part you made me drive, and then of course we had to stop and get ice cream on the way back.
Never pass a Dairy Queen.
No, we never did, and especially if we went up towards Springfield, we had to stop at Young's Dairy because that was automatic. That was, I don't know about you guys, but that's just what we did. But so we pulled in but the thing of it is, Vandy he made me drive. But then I had to buy the ice cream too. And when we started out working JV games, I got $10.
He trained you well.
He did. It's like, oh, don't even start.
You got to pay your dues.
Yeah, pay your dues. That's what it was. So,
right. Yeah.
But, that was a treat, and I enjoyed that. And then having the opportunity to have somebody like Jimmy here who I coached in high school and had him in class, and then for him to get started in officiating, being able to officiate games with him as well. Ryan McCurley was another guy that Ryan's still officiating, and I got an opportunity to work with him his first state basketball tournament game together. So that's probably the most fun. I mean, and I officiated because I enjoyed the guys and the people that you work with, and the people that you meet.
What's the most games you ever worked in a year?
I wasn't like a lot of these guys because I, back in, I think it was 87, I was working varsity boys, high school basketball, varsity girls, and started working college basketball at that time. And at that time, that means I was going like 6 nights a week.
Yep.
And I had a young family at that time, did not want to do that much, and so something had to give, and I gave up girls basketball. So the last girls basketball game I officiated was the 1987-88 season.
How many times have you been in state tournament?
And I've been fortunate enough to work 8 state tournament basketball games, 4 semifinals and 4 finals, Division I final a couple of times. And I remember my first state basketball game at St. John's Arena in 1997. And I took you along, and I remember standing down there on the floor and just looking straight up at St. John's because those seats just go straight up and everything. And that was, boy, an eerie feeling. But, and of course, I think the next year was the last year that they played in St. John's high school basketball state tournament. They went to the Shot then after that, and I worked at the Shot 7 different times. But you could only go every other year. You couldn't work every year. And I think it was like 5 years after I worked my first one in 97. I didn't work my next one until 2002. But I think I worked 24 years of regional games or something like that. I don't know what it was, but
good career.
And I don't know how many games, but I didn't do. I mean, toward the tail end of my career and stuff, I was only working maybe 30 to 35 games, during the year because I didn't want to work 3 or 4 nights a week. And at that time, I was working Tuesday nights and Friday nights, and then I handpicked my Saturdays. And some guys would call me up and ask me to go up to Rushi or someplace else that you can't even get there from here, for a basketball game on a Saturday night. And I think I went up there maybe once or something like that. And I said, you had to leave like at 4:30 in the afternoon.
That's right.
And get home until midnight. And it's like,
right. That's Division 4.
Well, it
or 5 or 6.
It doesn't make any difference what division it is, but but come a long way. I mean, you think about officiating. That's what we're talking about here this evening. Is he started out, and I think at that time when I started, I think varsity officials maybe made $30, $35.
Yeah, probably.
And then you paid your JV official $10 or something like that. And that's kind of where it got started.
That's why you bought the ice cream.
Yeah, that's why I bought the ice cream, I know. But, it's come a long ways. And we can talk about the goods and the bads of that, and we can talk about that a little later here, how that has changed and things. But no, I enjoyed it. And like I said, it's the people that you meet, the coaches, and having been in education now for 40 years and having coached at least one sport for 36 straight years that I coached at Lebanon High School. So I got to know a lot of people, both on the coaching side of it that way, as well as an official. So that lends itself for a different perspective. Yeah. But I enjoyed it. And like I said, it's the people that you meet. That's why I officiate. And that's why I quit 2 years ago, because I wasn't having as much fun as I used to.
You're older than everybody now.
A lot older than everybody.
That's what I find out.
Yeah, and so therefore not that I couldn't work or anything else, it was just time.
Yeah.
And I thought 37 years was enough, and went out on a good note. Happened to be recognized as the boys basketball official of the year in the state in 2017, so that was a good time to quit.
Yeah.
My last game was at the Shot with a state game, and being official here, I thought that was a good time to go out. So all worked out good. So very, very pleased, and wouldn't have changed a thing.
You got out before they threw you out.
That's right.
Some
I
guys
got
don't
out of
do
my own terms before anybody told me, Lee, it was time to go. Because I always said that to guys. You look at some guys and you say, don't ever let me do that.
Yeah.
You tell me when it's time to get out, when I'm not getting up and I'm not getting the job done or whatever it is. Because, coaches, you're coaching, and a lot of times you're hired and fired based on what you do and your performance of your kids out there. And the last thing you want to do is cheat the kids. So you go out there and work the game, and if you can't get it done, then it's time to get out. And fortunately, I got out before anybody had to tell me it was time to get out. So happy about that.
Yep. Jimmy?
Well, for me, Coach, it was back in 1993. I had just finished night school to complete my degree while working full-time. A good friend of mine, Ryan McCurley, came to me and asked, what are you going to do with all your spare time now? And I told him I hadn't really given any thought, and he asked if I would consider getting my basketball officiating license. And he talked me into doing it. I did it, took the class, worked some games, and really enjoyed it, and was fortunate enough to get partnered up with some good varsity officials at the time, guys like Lee Day, Ryan McCurley, Ryan's dad, Bob McCurley, Ted Daggerford, and Dave Campbell, and Joe Cole. All hired me as their JV official or freshman official for the games that they were working as their varsity contest that night. And they taught me how to do things the right way, really learned from them by watching them, and really found that I enjoyed it and was making a lot of new friends and acquaintances throughout the Fellowship of Officiating. So much so that after 2 years, I decided to get my football license, and I've been doing football now for 26 years. Basketball, 28 years.
Yeah. And I had him in class.
That's right.
And I still work his games for him.
There you go.
So for me, I have found that over the years that I've met a lot of great people. I know we all have in this room. People with different walks of life, different industries, people that you might not have otherwise encountered, and you've built long-lasting friendships that will last even after you come off the court or off the field and you retire. And from a standpoint of being able to network with those folks and help them out over areas of expertise that you might have in advising them or their children for things that they need. Everybody always helps each other out, and I think it's a nice little collegial community of officials that we have here in Southwest Ohio.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Number of games you work in football, you're sort of limited at, 1 game a week or 2 games at most a week. But then if you go postseason, you can get 12 weeks in, I think, something like that.
I've been very fortunate over the years. A period of time I even worked college ball at the Division II, Division III, and Division I lower level college games. Worked high school every Friday. 10 Fridays is typically the typical football season, and I'm working every Friday. Mm-hmm. Try not to work Saturdays because, as Lee mentioned, you have a family and family commitments. You basically want to make sure that you're trying to give them your free time as well. And so every season, it's 10 Fridays for me, and then whatever I'm fortunate enough to receive postseason-wise. And I've been fortunate over my career to have 4 state finals, and that means that I've worked the 5 following weeks after the end of the season, and I've worked at Fawcett Stadium before the renovation, after the renovation, Massillon, and when the finals were at Ohio State Stadium, I worked there as well. So those are some things that will always be special in my mind from the football standpoint. Basketball, it's been a very fun ride of enjoying companionship and friendships that I've fostered over the years. And I've been fortunate enough to work with guys like Lee Day on the court, who actually mentored me at one point in time, and he still accepted the contract and worked with me. We worked quite a few games over the years, and for me, basketball-wise, right now at the point I am in my career, I'm working about 35 games a season and just working boys basketball. But at the height, probably when I was in the middle of my basketball officiating, I probably worked as many as 70 games a year.
Yep. And getting started, you got to do it. You got to get all ages, all situations, community ball, rec ball, whatever. get those under your belt so that you feel anything is going to come across you, you're going to be able to handle. I know that during postseason, you guys, you generally sort of keep it under your belt of what games you have. And I didn't realize, but I was watching the state finals, Division I, and all of a sudden I hear this voice. The referee is talking, and it's Jim Johnson talking, the Division I state finals. And I said, I know that guy. Yeah.
Yeah,
good thrill.
It is a very nice honor as influence comes in from not only your peers that have a say in who gets a chance to work at that high of a level, but assigners as well as folks from the state, and coaches have input as well as athletic directors. And I think anyone sitting in this room that has ever worked a postseason game in any sport would be humbled by the fact that that honor's been bestowed upon them, and that they're thought that well enough of to work at that level.
Good. Well, Brendan, we'll go next with you. I know, what, 5 sports, whatever it is. Brendan Smith.
Well, I started out I've been around sports my whole life pretty much. I went to Wayne High School, and my grandfather was Lefty McFadden, who used to be a professional baseball player and ran the Dayton Gems and Washington Capitals, all these different things. And so I was kind of always around sports and playing sports too, you know, and even afterwards playing kind of competitive softball. I started umpiring softball on, you know, weekends, different tournaments and this and that. And actually, to get into high school stuff, Mike Cates, a longtime official, got me involved in basketball. So I started basketball, and this is my 25th year. Like I said, I do football, basketball, softball, volleyball. And, you know, like Jimmy and Lee both said, as far as, you know, back then, the varsity officials took the JV guys with us. And, you know, I was very fortunate back then to work under Bob Giuliano and Lee Barlow and, you know, Lou Gagliardi and, you know, people like that, Mike Cates. That's basically kind of who I first followed. And football sort of the same way. Ron Duncan, when I very first started out, we followed his crew, and that, you know, which was a great football crew back in the day. Chet Roberts was on it, and Lou Gagliardi was on it, and Roger Smith, and all these guys, longtime officials. So kind of got to learn a lot from them, and, you know, like you said earlier, doing a lot of lower level stuff, and then moving on to many, many high school games, and did baseball for a long time, and then started doing a lot of college softball. And once I started doing that, probably 15 years ago, kind of phased baseball out because I don't think you really need to see the big softball and the little baseball. It just doesn't, you know, it doesn't fit right. So
Never thought of that.
So I kind of quit doing that, and, you know, I've just basically worked high school sports and volleyball, basketball, softball, football, probably for the last 10 years. But, you know, just lots of fun, enjoy it. Like they both have said, the people that you meet, you know, like Jimmy said, you probably wouldn't run into some of these people if you weren't involved in this, and which is really true. I've got some great friends, and, you know, working with certain people in basketball, I know for several years I worked tons of games with a great friend, Rod Charlton, who's, you know, was really a good basketball official around here, and Todd Shaw, and, you know, so just love the officiating community. I mean, it's a blast to do that, and, you know, it puts a little bit of money in your pocket, which, you know, the high school stuff, like Jimmy will tell you on a Friday night, we don't do that for the money, because you're there for 5 hours on a Friday night for a football game, and, you know, you leave there with $60. So it's kind of, you got to really kind of like it. And but, you know, when you're doing football, it's the whole thing. It's the band. It just brings you back to when, you know, you were a player, and I guess maybe you get that certain high from that, and that's kind of why you remain doing it.
Mm-hmm. You're a volleyball official, aren't you?
I do volleyball also.
Your wife's in the audience here right now.
She is.
I would like to ask her if she ever has to launder your volleyball shirt. I've never seen a volleyball coach break a sweat. And your shoes, you could have a pair of volleyball shoes, they'd last you for a career.
Well, the problem is they want you to wear white shoes, so you kind of got to keep them clean. You know, a lot of guys take their shoes with them to the the place and put them on and keep them all white. I don't know why black would look great, but Ohio High School wants white. So the volleyball, I mean, it's, when I first started doing it, I kind of just jumped into it, and I was like, I don't know anything about volleyball. I never played. I started watching, and I think in volleyball, really, the differences in officiating are at the most extreme, because a lot of officials don't call 2 hits or sets, and some do, and it's all over the place. The officiating in volleyball really is just everywhere. So it's kind of, but it's a good sport.
We'll give you a break now.
I appreciate it.
Chip, Mr. Chip Bonney.
My story is going to be a little bit different. I haven't been officiating as long as.
Yeah, but I got
these
some
guys.
questions for you.
Okay, so we'll go over it. I've been officiating for about 8 years. I spent. Well, who got me into officiating was actually my dad, which you guys probably know, Gene Bonney.
Gene Bonney.
Yep.
Years.
And-
How many years did your daddy officiate?
50. He did basketball over 50 years, 53 years maybe. And what got me into it, he hounded me for years, but I had my own kids and kind of coaching the Pee Wee teams, and it was like, hey, it's too much. I finally gave in, maybe 2011, and it'd been the second year, right before he passed away. We had an opportunity to actually officiate some junior high games together, so that would be a highlight. At the same time, my son had been playing lacrosse as a club sport, my son Trey, and they were looking for officials. So the same year I got into basketball, I also got into lacrosse, and I'm still doing lacrosse. I'm not doing basketball anymore. Too many things going on in the winter. My wife kind of had a discussion with me. So
That does happen.
it does, and but lacrosse, been doing that for about 8 years. Very much enjoy that. It's interesting with the growth. It's now an OHSAA sport. It might still be technically on probationary status, but the OHSAA now runs and oversees the sport. And,
Is it still in probationary lacrosse? I thought it was solid now.
It might. I know the first year it was. I don't remember if they officially.
Do they list that as up and coming or something? Is that what's that
Something
terminology called?
Something like that. So this was the second year the OHSAA handles the sport, and all of the assigning is now
Recognized
done.
as state champion.
Right. So, well, they've had state champions, but it's through the OHSAA
Yes.
now versus a kind of a club sport mentality. And interestingly enough, there's only about 65 to 70 officials this year to handle all of Southwest Ohio, both junior high and high school. So if you leave a night open on the scheduling system, you are pretty much guaranteed to work somewhere, and you can work 7 days a week if you wanted to with youth games and that kind of thing. So been doing that for about 8 years. I'm fortunate to at least I do get some tournament games each year, second, third level tournament games. Haven't got the state level yet, but that'll be a little bit tougher because there's a lot of collegiate officials that are also still doing the high school, and
Okay.
so a lot of them, of course, get the state level games. And I'm busy enough that I'm not pursuing a collegiate refereeing career, and so.
Chip, I go to a lot of the lacrosse games, Lebanon and elsewhere and so on. How do you educate the spectators? I mean, there's people up yelling, and I know enough about it that they don't know what they're talking about it, and it's just, are there that many gray areas in the calls in lacrosse?
Not necessarily, but if you don't know the rules, then it sure seems like there's a lot of gray areas. One, it's a lot of fun. Much like football, lacrosse players wear a fair amount of equipment. They got shoulder pads and body pads and elbow and hand pads and a helmet. And what's interesting is we go through a lot of this every year in our meetings. Just because something touches the helmet does not mean it's a foul, but you can hear mom in the stands screaming.
Oh.
Little Johnny somebody brushes the side of the helmet
With the stick.
with the stick, and it didn't whack them, with a baseball swing. They were just talking about just barely brushing the side, and they're screaming at the top of their lungs, "Oh my God! It's a head hit. You've got to call something."
Yeah, call something.
We call that a brush. If it's just a grazing on the side of the helmet, that's why you wear the helmet, right? I mean, that's why you have to wear it. And so it's things like that where, but I think it's probably the same thing in any sport. Football, little Johnny gets blocked really hard, and oh my God, that had to be a clip. So yeah, it's interesting. I think a lot of people don't understand, some of the basic rules, offsides. Lacrosse has it's a mixture of football, basketball, soccer, and hockey. There's a penalty box and some other things. So I think part of it is there's a confusion of when you mesh all those sports into, it has its own set of rules, and they don't always know exactly what rules being enacted, perhaps. And we're not announcing those things. All of a sudden we give a hand signal and you're in the box for 2 minutes, non-releasable, and we're doing our thing. We know what we're doing, but it's not like we're always able to communicate.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
The crowd didn't think so.
Oh, I know. They know.
But
they know what they know.
It's different than.
And I can't
than
see
that.
anything.
Well, guys, open up here. Any bizarre situations that you had in officiating? Maybe I know that maybe you can't think of them off the top of your head, but there's always crazy things that go on, and you think you've seen it all, and all of a sudden something new comes up. And
The best one I got is, it's comical, and it has nothing to do with officiating the game. But if you remember back when 2 varsity officials would take a JV guy and we'd split the JV game.
Yep.
So there'd be 3 of us that would work. 2 varsity officials would work the varsity game, but each of them would work half the JV game.
yeah, that was common.
Yeah, and I had, I'm going to go ahead, a guy named Tim Tolliver was working the JV game, and Craig Colston and I were working the varsity game at Goshen. Now this is the old Goshen gym, okay? I mean, yeah. So anyway, we're getting dressed in this coach's office there because you couldn't dress in the locker room because there wasn't a locker room. Well, the locker room was a PE locker room, didn't have any doors on it. And there was equipment stacked up in the shower, so you weren't going to take a shower, so you didn't have to worry about it. So you dressed across the hallway in this little coach's office. So Craig went out and worked the first half of the JV game with Tim, and then I went out to work the second half. Well, unbeknownst, we come back in and get ready to work the varsity game, and Craig broke the zipper on his pants during the JV game and getting undressed. Well, and he didn't bring another pair of pants. And at that time, I didn't carry my little sewing kit with the, safety pin and things like that in it. So now we got to go out and work the varsity game. Craig he didn't have any pants to wear. And Tim Tolliver probably wore a size 30 or 28 or something like that. He was so daggum skinny. So he's got that. And I was probably, 32. So Craig had to wear my pants and I had to wear Tim's pants so we could go work the varsity game.
Nobody fit, huh?
No. We had to play musical pants before we go and work the daggone game. So that was but after that.
One to remember.
After that, I always carried a little sewing kit with a safety pin in it and stuff like that. And a lot of times I would carry 2 pair of pants, to games and different times after that.
You learn.
Kind of learn your lesson.
Yeah.
And stuff. But that was a funny story, and I'm sure you guys have got other things as well, but that was comical.
I can mention one. I mentioned the penalty box, much like a lacrosse game.
Uh-huh.
They played with 10 guys, goalie for each team, and nine players. And there was a game over at Wilmington, a varsity game. Got a little chippy. Both teams were being kind of aggressive and physical. And I remember it being funny because two guys started to pretty much fight on the field. Of course, we immediately put them. It didn't get enough to where we would throw them out of the game, but we put them in the penalty box. But that begat others. And before long, the penalty box was full. You can only have 3 guys on each team in the penalty box at a single moment in time. And if you have other penalties, then you have to stack them. And as soon as somebody gets out, then you put the next one in. So for about a whole quarter, we had a series. About half of both teams got penalties. So the field doesn't have a whole lot of players because you had no midfielders basically. So
does that make it easier to officiate?
Well, yes and no. Yes, in the sense you got less players to watch. No, because everybody's ire was still fired. Everybody was fired up. So the rest of the game, everybody's looking to take a cheap shot when they can. And so, but yeah, that was real interesting to see. We would have to administrate so many penalties. Yeah. Well,
now
fortunately, that
you have to, as official, you just have to remember that so and so is stacked, and as soon as somebody comes in, then that number 20 has to go out.
Typically we would try to write it down on our cards, and as well as communicate that to the scorebook, the person keeping the scorebook, so they can help us remember that as well. So yeah, it got kind of confusing because you're trying to.
Oh boy!
You got to remember all the numbers and then get them in the box and make sure you had the right penalty to go with it and the amount of time that they would have to stay in. So yeah, it was quite. We lost a fair amount of time just doing the administration of all of that. So that was fun.
Jimmy, Brendan, you got any? Sports you ought to have all
I
kinds.
can remember one. Looking back on it, at the time it wasn't funny at all, but looking back now it was. We had St. X and Moeller week 10 in football. And it was supposed to be on a Friday night. They changed the game to Saturday. Whoever won the game was going to the playoffs. Whoever lost was going home. And it was on Fox Sports. It was televised and all this stuff. And it was at St. X. And Moeller ended up beating them. Well, after the game was over, we're trying to get into the locker room so we can get dressed and get out of there. I mean, the place was packed anyway. So we stand there and we're waiting, and the guy that had the key originally, he walked by and nothing. Somebody else walked by and nothing. It was like, so we sat, honestly, I bet it was at least 30 minutes before they let us in there because they were upset that they had lost. And I don't know, I guess they thought it was our fault or something. But looking back on it, it was kind of funny. But at the time, we were all very upset about it. So.
I remember a time where Ryan McCurley, Joe Dick, and myself were driving up north to work in the Shelby County League on a Saturday night. A lot of the games down around our area here in lower southwest Ohio were canceled because of bad weather, but they were playing. And we got in the car and we left extra early to make sure we could get there. We pulled in plenty of time. However, we failed to understand the significance of the game in the sense that everybody from both communities were there to watch that game that night as we were winding down the basketball season. There's no place to park. There's a handicap spot, and then there's a spot by the door that has a sign on it that says donor reserved parking. So we took the opportunity to park in that spot. So during the JV game, somebody comes on the intercom and announces, will someone move their car that is parked in the donor's parking spot that is reserved? I wasn't the driver, but I went to the AD and explained to the AD that there wasn't any available parking and that we'd park there and we'd be happy to move our car if they could find another place for us to park. And he said, don't worry about it. That's my dad's parking spot and he's not coming tonight.
Thank goodness, huh? Yeah. What, in your sports, in your different sports, what is the common request from the stands about calls? What do you hear most?
In basketball, you hear called at both ends.
Called at both ends.
I mean,
Okay.
that's your typical common response from a lot of fans is called at both ends. And that's probably the most common one I
Football,
can think
what's the coaches yelling at you?
Oh,
Do you
they're,
hear most
they're
of the-
holding us out there.
Huh?
They're holding us
Every play.
every play.
Yeah.
They're grasping every play. They're not holding every play.
Right.
There's a difference.
Brendan, one of your sports, you got them all.
Baseball, softball got to be the same way. Call it both ways. On pitches, I would say. You hear a lot of people chirping in the stands from that. And the thing is, the plate is this big, and you have somebody sitting over here on this corner. I mean, how they don't? There's no way they know where the pitch is or isn't. So it's kind of humorous, but after a while, it kind of can get on your nerves a little bit too.
Yeah. Chip, probably take care of my boy out there.
I was going to say, I can't, maybe that's just universal. People just want called on both ends or called the same way for both teams, whether for lacrosse, you can be slashing or hard hits and things like that. They just want you to be consistent. So, saying it a different way, but I think it's probably more anything the coaches want. They want to know how the field looks and then call it consistently that way so the kids can adjust.
Maybe in the last 6 or 7 years you don't see this, but you guys that's been in it for 20 years or so on, where do you see officiating going?
You want to start?
I can. I see the numbers that come out of the state as far as the number of registered officials that we have. Right now, there are approximately 14,400 registered officials in the state of Ohio. Of those,
All sports.
all sports. All those officials amount for approximately 20,600 licenses across the different sports through the state of Ohio. So what that tells me is that there's about 38–40% of the officials are multi-sport officials. That number is about 2,170 less officials than there were 9 years ago. So it's a declining number.
14,000 total, and there's 2,000 less.
Over 2,000 less registered officials within the Ohio High School Athletic Association.
Reasoning? Thoughts? Your thoughts? You're all in it.
I have a couple of thoughts, not to monopolize the discussion there, but we are on a 10 consecutive year economic recovery in this country.
Mm-hmm.
That means people are financially doing okay. They don't need extra money. And you're seeing people that are deciding, I want to take that extra time that I would spend officiating and spend it with my family, traveling, or doing something entertainment-wise. That's part of it. Another part of it, I feel, is as associations that officials are members of, I don't think we've done a very good job in recruitment and the development of officials. Although in the recent year or two, I think some associations are taking the opportunity to try to get out there and reach out through multimedia channels to interface with younger high school student athletes, kids that are going off to college that may have an interest in learning about becoming an official and obtaining their license. And I've seen it go as far as some schools are starting to even offer classes on becoming an official and helping them become licensed while they are in high school as part of their physical education credit. And I keep hearing numbers that there were perhaps 20 schools that did that last year and as many as 100 that are expected to do that this year. So the state is aware of the situation of the declining number of registered officials, and they are working with the associations and through partnerships with local schools trying to do something about it.
There's really not a great shortage of your Sunday afternoon, fourth grade game, fifth grade game. We've got plenty of officials for that. But there's a group of people that are officiating that don't want to do anything but that, because they can get $20, $25 a game. It's 1 hour. They're going to get 3 games. They get $75, and basically no harassment, no travel, no meeting. Well, you get your meetings to go to, but you don't have virtually no pressure on it whatsoever. And normally that age person is probably, which should be 17, 18, 19-year-old kids doing this. No. What is it? It's 50, 60-year-old people doing that. But they don't want to do it any higher because, as you mentioned before, you get $60 and you're going 5 hours, that's $12 an hour, plus you got your expenses. Young guys are saying, wait a minute, they don't need that extra money to come. Very well put of reasoning, why we don't have them. Other thoughts?
And what Jim was saying, that as head of the guidance department over at Middletown High School now, I've got with one of our PE teachers, and we are going to be offering, and got it approved through our curriculum, an officiating class, a semester class, starting in the fall. And we have 37 students signed up for the first semester, where the kids are going to be getting football and basketball and baseball officiating, and then we're going to turn it around in the spring, and we have another, I think it's 32 kids signed up for the class. We're going to do basketball again, and then turn around and hit softball officiating there. So the kids are going to be able to get, and they can actually go through, and we've worked it out with the OHSAA, to where they can go through and get their license.
Actually get their license.
And actually get their license and get certified. So they can take the test. They have to pay for the test to take the test and get their license, but they'll recoup that in a short amount of time, obviously. So we are starting at, they're going to earn a half a credit as a PE elective at the high school, give them an opportunity to go out and work these younger games, as you say, because you're right, they can go out and work, basketball games that have a time limit on them.
To an elementary school that might
with
be
these
2 blocks
youth
away.
leagues on a Saturday or Sunday, and they can walk away with probably as much as $100 to go work a few hours at that. They only have to show up 5 minutes before the game starts, and when that game's over, they're in their car and they're gone. As opposed to working a varsity game in basketball where we're asked to show up at the start of the JV game so we can critique the JV officials and help them. So therefore, if the JV game starts at 6 o'clock, you're needing to be there at 6. If I happen to be working, let's say it's a short trip, and I'm working up in Dayton at Kettering Fairmont, for example, so therefore I'm only driving 30 minutes, but that still means I'm leaving the house before 5:30 to make sure that I get there before 6 when they throw it up. JV game's over. We're supposed to start at 7:30 with the varsity game, which never happens, so it's going to be 7:45. And by the time you get done with that and you get home, it's 10 o'clock at best. And you left at 5:30.
Yep.
And you made $65 for that.
Don't say that too loud. We're going
No,
to
I know,
discourage people.
but-
We're going to discourage people from getting into it.
But I think the thing to
Sure.
get into is to get the young people involved in these youth league games and get them started. And now all of a sudden, if they get the itch to where that's something that they want to do and move up the ladder, then they can do that. But at least get them started with some of these youth league games and get them interested that way. And I think also that if we get high school athletes involved in officiating, they're going to understand their sport better because they're officiating it.
Absolutely.
It's probably going to make them better players.
Each sport requires 4 meetings. Now, Brendan, you got 5 sports. Now, does baseball, softball take care of one meeting, take care of both, or is it separate?
It has in the past, but not now. Now you got to go to
Really?
baseball and you got to go to softball.
Wow.
Sometimes when you depending on where you go, they may have half the room goes in here for baseball, half the room goes in here for softball. But I go to Greene County usually for my meetings at Beaver Creek, and you go at 6 o'clock for baseball, 7 o'clock softball. So
Okay.
I mean, it's a lot of time. I mean, the meetings. Then you have to do the state test too. Whether you go to somewhere, you got to view it online. And but I going back to what they said as far as youth, young people, times have changed. I mean, 25, 30 years ago, people were different than they are now. I mean, I got to be honest. My wife's a teacher. I see these kids now. They're so coddled. Parents, I think, give them so much, and I think the work for mentality is not the same. I know a lot of these guys in basketball, like Lee said, you have to get there early and watch the JV game and stuff. These guys will come in at halftime, and half of them, they are not interested in what you've got to tell them. I mean, as far as, and I pick out maybe one or two things. I could write a book on it, maybe the first half, but I'll pick out one or two things because you don't want to discourage them. I was so lucky when I first started out, the guys I worked under, they kind of would just make fun of you, so you kind of got tired of being made fun of, so you would start doing things correctly, but they didn't chastise you or, discourage you in that sense. But these guys anymore, it's hard to tell them things, it's hard to say, hey, bud, you called a foul, but you didn't put your hand up, and when you had a block charge, it's, you just don't know. And you try to say, hey, maybe you need to work on this, you need to work on that. And I think they want to advance and maybe, go directly in 2 years as a state official when you got to bide your time. It doesn't happen that quick.
Well, the old way was the school hired the officials. Now, I don't always say that's good, but the school, the athletic director, would hire the officials. And normally there'd be two guys, and that's two-man officiating in those days, that would work together. Let's say Jimmy Johnson, Ryan McCurley. You liked each other, you enjoyed. You would get your JV official, you'd take him to the games, you'd watch him, you'd work with him, you'd nurture him along. He would watch, he would learn, you would help. Now, you got a guy sitting in an office in Xenia or Springfield or Dayton or Cincinnati, and he says, okay, I need 3 guys now for basketball over here at Princeton Coleraine game. Oh, let's put these 3 guys. That might be the biggest game in the evening on Friday night, and he picks maybe 2 fellas with 3 or 4 years experience, and maybe an older one or something like that. Plus, when they get there, they say, okay, hi, Lee. Well, yeah, I've met you before. You don't know each other. I mean, and the JV officials, they work their game, they grab their coat and they run out.
Oh, yeah.
They're done. It's really, I think the assigning has really hurt the officiating.
I can remember back in the day, there were some assigners, like Mike Hall, for example, he used to assign the SCOL, and he basically would just go right down the state and regional list, and he'd give you a game, and he'd say, bring 2 partners. Well, back, in that situation, I was working tons of games with Rod Charlton and Todd Shaw. I mean, we were working all the, 30 games a year together. Those
Ride
were the
together,
best
talk
officiated
together.
games in basketball that I could recall. We were all kind of on the same page. We had each other's backs. We're there to have fun,
Put
I
the
mean,
call.
and like you said, I told Steve Parks that last year, one of the assigners. I said, hey, by not letting you work with some of your friends, it's going to drive me out of basketball, guaranteed. Actually,
think
this year is my last year.
Most of the people that I talk to say it's not fun like it used to be, because when Jim Johnson gets to a game, here comes Chip Bonney in, here comes Brendan Smith, and you come from Lebanon, and you come from Xenia, and you come from, I don't know, West Carrollton or wherever, and when you get together, you have a little, pre-game and work the game and say, hi guys, we'll see you, and that's it. Yeah. Ages of officials. Chip, I've noticed in lacrosse games, I have not seen any young officials. Are there young officials?
Yeah, there's some.
Okay, I've not seen any that I'd say are under 40 years old.
There are a few, much like most of them used to play. I know
Okay.
I got a couple of them in mind, and they're progressing very quickly. They were good players, and they've migrated and became good officials. So what has ended up happening, though, because that's like anything, they're still in really good shape. They get a lot of the bigger games as well. One in particular I'm thinking of. I know he gets a lot of games. So he's going to do X and Moeller, or which is big in lacrosse as well, or Mason and Loveland, or Mason and X, or some of the better schools that have had lacrosse for a long time. So, yeah, there's a few out there. There's not. I don't want to make it sound like there's a lot, but again, there's only 60. Like I say, we only had about 65 this past year. So we're working a lot of games. So.
Well, anybody out there watching the show right now is listening to what we're doing, but if you're interested in any way, contact somebody that you know is officiating and get started in it, because we've talked about maybe what would be here. The training, I think that's a great idea. We're doing it in physical education classes. They've been doing it in college classes for umpteen years. I got my license when I was a junior in college, just because I could work intramural ball and make some bucks doing it.
Yeah.
But I really think that's a great thing. When you're talking about recruiting, Lee, you have a couple people that you think might make a good official and so on, but I don't see that as being a way to solve our problem.
No, and it's not. And it goes back to what you said, Vandy, because we took guys along.
Yeah.
And so therefore, we talked basketball on the way there.
Yeah.
You watched me work my game as a JV official. I watched your game as a varsity official, and we talked about those two games on the way home. That's how you learn. And now it's just what everybody's saying, that, I'll go watch the JV game, and how much time do I have to talk to them if I'm working the varsity game?
Yeah.
Maybe a minute or
yeah,
two as we pass in and out the door.
Yeah.
And those guys are going to leave because they're not going to stick around, because they're not paid to stick around.
That's true.
And therefore they're out the door and they're gone. I know Jimmy's secretary of our Middletown Basketball Officials Association, and I know he can talk a little bit about, if people want to get started, how they can get registered and get started.
We're running a little short on time. But
It's very
how do
simple.
we?
Very simple. Real quick, just go to OHSAA.org. That's the Ohio High School Athletic Association's website. And in the right-hand corner at the top, there is a button that you can click for officiating. And then right underneath that, that'll open up the next page to click on becoming an official, and you can choose your sport and get registered through the state of Ohio.
Good. One thing you always say after go, let's get it right. You see more and more now of a call being made, and then the officials huddle over here and talk it over, or if it's on a higher level, they look at the monitor. I watched the World Series last night, College World Series last night. 3 or 4 times they run it over and back, over and back. They're ready. Boom, boom calls at first base, whether it was safe or out. They run it over, and they got it right. And I think that's the biggest thing. Now let me tell you about what I'm a track and field official. I don't get yelled at, because all I do is shoot the gun.
Shoot the gun.
And whoever gets there first, that's not too
Pretty
hard.
objective, isn't it?
And what else? They got a camera on it, and a guy in a trailer here. It's on camera, and all of a sudden, boom! Here's the time. Here's the winner. I love it. I don't have nobody yells at me unless the gun doesn't go off. That's easy. Well, guys, listen, I appreciate you coming in. I hope you have some questions for people that maybe watch this and get it in there. So good. We've had a good time doing it. Thanks for putting the time in here, and good luck on keeping going. And don't retire until they run you out.
There you go.
Hey, folks, thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. And if you know any of these guys, they wouldn't mind talking with you about officiating or how you get started or whatever. But it's a good game. And the thing of it is, officials try to get it right. And contrary to what you fans think, guys don't go in a game saying, I think I'm going to help this team win, or I don't like this kid, oh, that doesn't happen. The integrity of the people are bigger now. Hang in there. Take care of the Stripes. Make sure they're doing their best. Thanks for watching.